Okay, previously we spoke about different methods of creating Bishul Yisroel, and today was going to be the last part of that, and actually the last part on Bishul Yisroel altogether, which is about different devices that might help in creating Bishul Yisroel. So the first one we're going to talk about is a light bulb or glow plug, and it starts as follows. The Gemara says that one of the ways that a yid could help in making food Bishul Yisroel, well, in that case, the Gemara is talking about Pas Yisroel, is by stoking the coals that are heating the oven. Now, Taisus understands that by stoking the coals, it helps the cooking, and therefore, that's the kind of stoking of the coals that makes the Bishul Yisroel. That's good enough to be considered that the yid participated. But the Rambam says not like that. The Rambam says no, stoking the coals one time has nothing to do, makes no difference to the cooking of the food. The food doesn't cook any better or faster because of that. So why is it good? Why is it good if it doesn't do anything? So it must be that the reason is because all the yid has to do is make a heker, do something symbolic to show that this food is wouldn't be kosher if not that I participated. That's how we avoid sort of chasnas. It shows us a little separation, and so any heker is good enough, even if it has nothing to do with making the food cook faster or anything like that. And the Rambam says even further. He says that the same thing would be true. You don't have to stoke the coals, which is actually a little to do with the cooking. Even if you throw in a tiny bit of wood, we call it hashgachas kisem. You throw in just like a splinter with the wood. That's good enough. Obviously it doesn't help the food cook anymore if there's one tiny toothpick thrown into it. But even so, it is a heker, and therefore that's why it's good enough. That makes the food that's cooked to be Bishul Yisroel or Pas Yisroel. So now, and the din follows like that. That follows like this shita that's makeup that says all you need is a heker. The yid does not have to do something that specifically makes the food cook better or faster. Okay, with that background, Rav Heinemann said, well, what we could do is you could put it in an incandescent bulb. Incandescent is the old-fashioned bulbs that give off heat, more than the more modern ones that are not really much heat, but they put in an incandescent bulb, or you could put in a glow plug, or put in a flame that burns 24/7 that never goes out, put that into the oven, and if the yid would light that, turn on the bulb, or light the glow plug, or turn on the flame, this continuously burning flame, then everything that's made in that oven will be Pas Yisroel. Because what he did, that light bulb does nothing towards the cooking, but hecker it is. So that should be good enough. He's not helping. The little flame that he made in one part of the oven, that's not going to help the cooking. But again, it makes a hecker, and a hecker is good enough to make things be Pas Yisroel, Bishul Yisroel. And this idea made it really easy for companies to make food be Pas Yisroel, Bishul Yisroel, because all you had to do is install this thing, have the Mashiach turn it on, and then we're good. As long as it lasts, it's good enough. Now, that's true that this was suggested, but over the years, different poskim came up with reasons why they weren't so happy with this idea. So one is like this. The first is more like we use the word a Hashgachah type thing, which is the idea of having a heker is to show that if a yid doesn't participate, the food is not kosher, and that prevents closeness and chasnas. So it seems like an oxymoron to say that's what we do, and it's permanent; it'll last forever. So something lasting forever sort of seems to be missing the point of that we need a heker. We need the yid to be here every time. It seems like so that's like a hashkafa point. It's like how could it be that something that's permanent could be a heker for what we're trying to do here? Okay, now. More to the details, Hashgachah said that even though all the yid has to do is make a heker, but his heker has to be part of the fire. It can't be that there's a fire over here and 20 feet away there's the heker, like just put up a flare, like we just put like a heker on the side. It has to be part of the flame, part of the cooking of what's being cooked. A lot of people agree with that. Hashgachah says that Rav Yashav agreed with him on this point, and therefore people who want to follow this, many who follow this, what they'll do is they will make sure that they have a glow plug or a flame that's on all the time that's part of the cooking flames. Now, you can't use a light bulb anymore. You can't put a light bulb into the cooking, but you put a glow plug or have one flame that stays on all the time. Let's say, the oven has 50 flames. One of those could be made special that stays on all the time. Now, a different angle was, Rabbi Yaakov Fisher said that bulbs are there to give light. That they sort of, by default, they end up giving heat also, especially, the old ones, they give heat also. He says, but you can't say that I made Bishul Yisroel by putting in something that's meant for light. I need to put something in that's meant for heat, like a piece of wood into the fire is for making more heat. So but he was okay as long as he used like a glow plug or a fire, just not the the light bulb per se. And some hashgachas follow this, and therefore again they wouldn't use a light bulb, but they would use a glow plug or a flame that's on all the time. Okay, the last argument was Rebelsky, who said that you can only make a hecker if the fire is already there. The guy has made a fire, and we can't cook in that fire until we make a hecker. So I make a hecker in the flame that's already there, but we can't have a hecker that comes before the fire. He says, how can I make a hecker that this is a Jew's participation and my hecker is there before him? And which of course is the whole idea here, is to say I have this bulb or this glow plug that's here all the time. That means when they turn the oven off, tomorrow when they come back to turn it on, my hecker is there before. And Rebelsky said, no, you can't have a hecker that's there before the fire itself. Now, Rebelsky didn't give a source for this, and Rosh Hashanah actually brought a raya that it's not correct. And that's because we spoke about a different time that if a yid lights the fire in an oven, and then the fire goes out, and there's still some residual heat left over from the yid's fire, when the guy creates a fire afterwards, that is considered to be Bishul Yisroel or Pas Yisroel. And over there it's explained, and the reason is because that's considered a hecker. It's like Hashgachah gives the hecker. So there, the heat left over, the residual heat from the Jew's fire, is there before the non-Jewish person builds his fire. So that shows you that there's no difference whether the hecker comes before or after the guy made the fire, and most hashgachas follow that part of it. Okay, so again, a lot of hashgachas overall follow the idea Rav Heinemann is suggesting, but sometimes with some tweaks of only using a glow part or a flame, not a bulb, or only using things that are integrated into the fire or something like that. Okay, now let's move to something else. Excuse me, and that is a boiler. When a yid wants to do something to make a hecker or to do something for the fire, there has to be a direct connection between what he does and the fire or the cooking. Like, for example, you could light a fire, or you could put a pot on the fire. So what the yid did, the mashgiach did, has a connection, a direct connection to what he's did. But we've said in the past, if he's turning on a timer, then and the timer will turn on the oven in 6 hours from now, then that's too removed from my action, is too removed from the fire that's going to be cooking, because I set the timer now, and the flame doesn't go on until whenever. So therefore, that's not considered good enough to make Bishul Yisroel. Okay, so now when we turn to a commercial boiler, which would be used like for cooking in a factory, it's sort of in between those. When you push the button on the boiler to turn it on, it doesn't turn on. What happens is, first, the boiler has to go through all kinds of steps before it actually turns on and a flame starts working. It has to get rid of all the oxygen, the air blown out of it. It does safety checks. The different things go on. And then after all that's done, then the boiler decides, okay, now I'm ready, and it turns itself on. So is that considered good enough? Is that direct enough from what I push the button that a couple of minutes later goes on? Is that considered direct enough or not? And Rosh Hashanah thought it was. And he said like this. He says, there are some halachas where only the very first action that is a result of what I did is considered my action. So like in this case, pushing the button, let's say the first thing it does is blow air out. So then blowing the air would be considered my action, and everything after that would be too indirect. But he said, but that's for very, very specific halachas. Is that true? Otherwise, as a rule, we say is that if I do something and the direct result of what I did is that something else happens, that is considered to be my action. And therefore, turning on the boiler, my pushing the button, 3 minutes later, the boiler goes on. It went through 10 steps to get there, but basically it's a direct result from my pushing the button to 3 minutes later, the boiler goes on, and therefore that is considered Bishul Yisroel if we get lights there. Now, for boilers, this idea that I just mentioned about the lighting it works fine for certain companies where the boiler or the oven stays on all the time. Like either it's on all the time because the factory is open always, it's always cooking at all the times, or they're not open all the time, but it's such a big deal to turn the oven or the fire or the boiler off and then restart again afterwards and heat it up, that it's just not worth it. So if they're closed every night for 6 hours, it's not worth it to turn the boiler off for that amount of time. Or they're closed even for the weekend, even so it's just not worth it. They just turn it down to low and they keep it on the whole time. And that way they're ready to roll again Monday morning as soon as they're ready to start again. So that's in a lot of cases, in which case a yid lighting the boiler a yid lighting the boiler or the oven will be good enough, as long as there's some kind of a control that he knows it didn't go out when he's away, and that's a separate issue. How does he make sure that it doesn't go out? But the setup at least has the obvious potential to be ready to be Bishul or Pas Yisrael just by the yid lighting, turning on the boiler or the oven. But there's a lot of other factories where that's not true, and they turn the oven off every night, or they turn it off for weekends. So how do we make those Bishul Yisrael? If you push the button, so if the place is located right near where there are from people, so then a mashgiach can come every day whenever they're ready to make food. He can come by and turn on the oven or turn on the boiler. That's fine. But often that's not the case. There's nobody living nearby, or it's a hassle and an expense to have someone come every day to turn it on. So someone came along, someone named Shain, and he came along and he came up with a system where the boiler or the oven is attached to a phone line, and it's wired in such a way that the only way to turn the oven on or the boiler on is by somebody dialing into the number that this device is connected to and pressing in a code. And by pressing in this code, that gets the boiler to go on. So what's happening is that every day someone has to turn it on, but that turning on doesn't need someone to physically show up at the plant. The mashgiach could be in his pajamas 500 miles away. All he needs to do is to dial in and press in the code, etc., and it makes it work. They call this a Shain device because the person who made it was named Shain, and it's just about everybody accepts that's a good way to make Bishul Yisroel Pas Yisrael. Pushing the buttons on my phone over here makes the boiler go on over there, and that's considered also to be a direct connection between what I did and the result that it is, which is turned on. Now, just to bear in mind, this Shain device has to be installed by professionals who are going to make sure that it can't be circumvented. Right? It doesn't do any good if the plant could do it themselves. Also, it's important that more than one person know the code and know the procedure for turning on the device, because mashgiach is not available every day of the year. Something can go wrong, or Slami is just away one day. So other people have to be able to be backups to turn on the oven or the boiler for the company. Now, something that comes up is that the mashgiach obviously can't do this on Shabbos and Yontif. So if you have a company which produces food on Shabbos, or almost every company wants to produce on Yontif, meaning because Yontif could be on a regular weekday, then all of a sudden we have a problem, because all of a sudden they have no way to turn on their oven or their boiler without the mashgiach being there. So sometimes we can avoid these problems when we use a mashgiach who's overseas. So someone who's so far away that for him it's not Shabbos or it's not Yontif when they're ready to start cooking over here, and therefore we can solve the problem by having people in the right places who can be the ones to do the calling for that times. But this is something that's a serious concern, and it needs to be thought about before you install the Shain device. Because if nobody thinks about it beforehand, all of a sudden on Erev Yontif, or even worse on Yontif, someone's going to realize that there's no one to turn the boiler on tomorrow because it's going to be Yontif and the rabbi's not available, and that's obviously not going to work well. So they got to think this through beforehand and come up with a plan. Maybe that means leaving the boiler on that day. Maybe it means giving vacation on that day. Something you got to come up with, or have the rabbi from far away do it. Some kind of a plan to deal with those kind of days.